Well, Susan, Grace, and I are here today with Slade Roberson. And Slade, I am so honored to be able to call you not only a mentor and a teacher of mine, but also a friend. And that is just like pretty special in my book. If I was really, really emotional, that's what would happen. With emotions would start streaming, but I don't know that they would. And so I really wanted to just thank you for coming on, one. And what Susan and I are obviously doing within the Be the Evidence podcast is exploring how we choose as humans to be conscious, right? Like how we choose to participate in the world and into the unfolding of who we are as our highest selves. And that's part of the reason what led me to working with you and taking your automatic intuition program was deepening my ability to be conscious and to use my intuition. And so I would really like to open up the conversation, not only about what you're doing, but this like theme of being the evidence in your world is probably exactly the work that you're doing. And for those people that don't know what you're doing, like I would consider you a professional intuitive. I know you're an author, but you're also so much more than that. And so the question that immediately comes up for me is like, what does that term being the evidence mean to you in your life? Because I know that there's been a lineage to get you to where you are today.
When I hear that term, be the evidence, the first thing that comes to mind is, the old bumper sticker from the 80s and the 90s about being the change that you want to see in the world. I can't remember what song lyric that's from, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind is sort of being the change that you want to see in the world. Whatever it is that you see lacking is what you try to put out there. And I think it's true for a lot of people who start speaking in whatever sphere they're using their voice in. It often comes after a long time of listening to what everyone else has to say and being aware that there's something that's not being said, or it's not being said in the right way, or maybe it's not being said to a certain group of people. So everything about who I am in my work and what I'm doing here in the world is trying to address that, speaking to that group of people that I feel like weren't being spoken to and saying the things that, I'm like, needs to be said kind of thing.
And so that's how you started automatic intuition, correct?
Automatic intuition kind of grew out of my readings practice. I was doing professional readings for several years, and I got to a point where more and more of my clients were actually my peers. They were you guys, people like you guys who were calling me up. Some of them were talented in healing arts that I'd never even studied. Some of them are quote unquote way more psychic than me. Some of them are just starting out learning, but there was this desire to somehow be mentored in figuring out how to do it in the way that they saw me doing it. So, from working with me, I don't use the word student. I don't think of myself as a guru. I just think of myself as somebody who has wandered around in this particular part of the woods for several more years. And so when you show up, hey, do you know any shortcuts? Why, yes, I do. And that's how the Automatic Intuition Professional Training Program came about, was just attracting other like-minded people. And over time, that started to sort of become a network, right? Kind of a family or a tribe.
I think it's so interesting, that piece about finding, like going on a hunt of finding your way through it, and then using your voice and your knowing, and then attracting other people. Like I know, Susan, this is part of the way that you've mentored other people as well, is because of like, oh, hey, I figured this out. All of a sudden I'm doing astrology. All of a sudden I'm like aware of my clairaudience or my intuition, right? And I'm responsible for not only utilizing but for sharing that with other people, right? For like being open.
Right. So being the evidence is exactly what Slade is talking about, is I figured something out. Here you go. I mean, I figured something out. What did you figure out? Sharing with each other what we figured out so far. Just like Slade said, by hanging around long enough, I've learned a few things. Here's what I know. And being the evidence that it's even possible or real.
Yeah. And I think that requires such a willingness to stand in that truth, right? To like follow that lineage. Susan and I were talking about that on the podcast this morning of like, when these awarenesses present themselves to you of like, oh, I have done all this intuitive work, or all of a sudden I'm getting visuals, or I'm getting downloads, and what do I do with this? I'm responsible for it in some manner. To follow that lineage and see where it takes you. There's such a requirement there to be in trust and in alignment and in relationship with spirit, with creator, with the universe, whatever you may call it, and a willingness to like show up and participate. How do you find that willingness to show up and participate morphs over time, Slade, as you like fine tune what you do with other people?
Yeah, because you start out thinking that no one is even remotely paying attention to you, or that you're about to open your mouth and say something to the void, or that you're about to say something that you're really alone in, and that you're going to be standing there with, you know, a crowd of crickets, you know, staring at you. And so that impulse to say it, to put it out there, to open your mouth, is, I guess it requires a certain bit of courage, or I don't even want to say it's like you have to be brave to do it. I think you have to be unfiltered in order to do it. I think you have to be willing to kind of make an ass of yourself, if that's what is required. What you will find when you do it is that all that hesitation about what the feedback and the response was going to be is really quickly shown to be a product of your imagination. And I think the thing that surprised me the most when I first started writing about my experiences, started as a blog, and I was thinking no one's ever even going to see this. Little did I know that there were people who were Googling for the very thing that I was seeing, and I very quickly found, oh, there's all these people who really want to talk about this, and they really want to hear what I have to say. Now, the way that that's morphed is, it started out as this cry into the void, right? But as soon as you get the feedback, then it becomes a conversation. So you are actually, or myself, I'm now simply providing answers or opinions or dialogue in response to the prompt from what other people are asking me. It gets easier once it's a conversation, because all you have to do is, you know, be there, show up for it, be present.
Yeah, it's overcoming that hurdle of like raw vulnerability. And I somebody once told me that your mind's your worst enemy, and I don't think I really understood that until Susan and I really started Be the Evidence, and I was like, oh yeah, my mind has all of these scenarios of how I'm going to be ripped apart for stating things that are true to me, right? Or for speaking up for ways that we don't show up in the world, or ways that we could shift consciousness or just being in the society. And then to recognize that I think as a collective, as a humanity, we are very desperate for these types of conversations. It's like we have been parched for a very long time, and we are really wanting to have our thirst quenched by connecting with individuals. Yeah. So one of the things that you have created is the Reboot program.
Yes.
All about creativity and inspiration. And I'm curious, Susan, what do you find, what is that process for you when you feel uncreative, or when you feel like your inspiration is starting to waver?
I feel that thing about the void. I feel like if there's a void, you have to talk into it. Mm-hmm. And if you wait until it's perfect, it's too late. And if you wait until you're inspired, you may never start. Just start participating in the void. And for me, that's what cranks up the creativity. When you start getting in it and go, oh, I actually care about this. Or you start, just like Slade was saying, you start getting feedback and it becomes a dialogue. It's going ahead and jumping in. I think if you wait until the perfect moment, or when you're absolutely overflowing with inspiration, or you have everything planned out perfectly, or you know you're never going to make a mistake, it's too late. Mm-hmm. You have to be willing to make mistakes and jump in and let that feed what's meant to come through you. Did you go through that, Slade, where you were like, I'm willing to make mistakes? It's okay.
Yes. And the way that I find myself talking about that is I started to put out B+ material. And when I was of the mindset that everything I make has to be an A+, a lot of stuff doesn't get done when it has to be an A+ in order to go out in the door. So I don't remember how that advice was first given to me, but it was given to me in the form of, kind of the way the tech world operates, right? Like, you put stuff out there, minimum viable product, let people play with it. They'll find what they need to be changed about it. Then you can change it. Then you can fix it. Then you can polish it up. So my version of that is, it's a B+. That's my judgment, though. We're horrible judges of our own worth, So the people who are on the receiving end of it may think it's an A. Shh, don't tell them otherwise. It's like, if they want to like it, let them. A friend of mine who was a singer a couple decades ago told me, once you put something out there, it's not really yours anymore. So stop acting like you get to control it.
Yeah, that's exactly the work of Elizabeth Gilbert when she talks in Big Magic of like our sole purpose as creators, which we are all creatives, right? Like we're all intuitives, we're all creatives, is to just show up for it, to filter it through you and to release it. And then whatever happens from there, and it has nothing to do with you at that point in time. But we have to be willing to do that, right? And I think that's where like your reboot program comes in of like how, I think as human beings, we all get to this place where we feel uninspired. We don't feel like we're in connection with our guides, where we are like, I'm missing signs maybe from the universe. I don't know that I can even trust the signs that I'm getting right now. I don't know that life really has my back. Like, I don't know that I'm actually in alignment with things unfolding in my actual favor. I don't know that I'm creative. I don't know if I'm capable of creating the life that I want to create. Like, we can all get into like that turmoil. And I know, like, Susan, you can speak to the astrology of that because we're currently in a lot of that mentality as of today.
Yeah, we've been dependent on permission. We've been dependent on approval. We've been dependent on what's been done so far. And if we don't match that, there's not a whole lot of people coming up and saying, no, you're still valuable and you're still worthy, get out here. And I'm just like Slade. I've had to have peers tell me things like, people like to see you grow. So go on, get out there. They like to see you grow, hit it. And things like, it doesn't belong to you anymore. Throw it out and don't have any attachment to it. I think it's more about us supporting each other and being willing to jump in.
Right. And so I think that's where your reboot program comes in, from my understanding of it, right? Of like, you go through 4 different aspects of reconnecting with your creativity, with your inspiration, with your guides, with your intuition. And I think that's so valuable, especially under this framework of like, be the evidence, right? Of like, what are the tools that we have available for us? Like, we have obviously astrology, we have our intuition, we have physical well-being, we have relationships, but like, what are actually that nitty gritty tools that we can use actively, repeatedly with ourselves and with our community members and our collective to help us tune back into that? Am I getting the premise of your program?
Yes. And well, and it's really funny too, because as you're mentioning all those wonderful things, it kind of speaks to why I started this. And just to clarify, this isn't a program that anybody has to pay for. It's kind of more of a challenge that I put out there on a podcast. And when I was talking about it, I wasn't even thinking like, somebody out there is actually going to take me up on this, which of course they did and wrote me back. And, it is something that you're meant to do for a certain amount of time, just to simplify where it came from. So a couple of winters back, not this one, but the one before, I was just getting client after client after client who was describing a feeling of disconnection from their creativity or from their intuition. Sometimes those two things are blurred; they go together. A feeling of what they call, when we say I'm depressed, but we're not clinically depressed. We're just, we're in a low energy state. We don't have any momentum. We're just kind of, And I was just hearing that over and over again. And one of the things that I noticed with the people that I work with, and probably a lot of your audience as well, is all the stuff that you just mentioned is upper chakra kind of stuff. Like, we're always trying to like open our divine crown and our third eye, and we're, you know, all about our throat chakra and speaking our voice, and we're everything heart and above. You know what I mean? Like, that's where all our energy is going. And it creates this imbalance, you know, this sort of top heavy energetic body. And you know, I was very late in life to the idea of fitness, like to really, you know, being in my body. And at 41, just to be really, really specific. But one of the things that I've noticed is how powerful the combination of being present in the body, paying a lot of attention to the chakras from the heart down, you know, especially the root, the solar plexus, the sacral chakra, those areas of the body, for people who are aspiring, intellectual, spiritual type people, they spend a lot of their efforts and energy up here, you know. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is create a really simple practice that anyone could do. You don't have to go buy new clothes from Lululemon. Don't go buy new shoes. All of that is procrastination, you know, that's distance. Just, you know, walking meditation is what I like to call it. And people get really in their head about meditation. Am I meditating right? I'm not sure how to do it. Do I need an app? You know, and I'm like, just go walk, go somewhere, see trees, have air on your face, have sun on your skin. It's a basic grounding thing to be in your body and to be really aware of the earth and everything around you. So it's a combination of a walking meditation, and then for the inspiration, creativity, intuition side of it, a free associative writing practice, like what you find in the Artist's Way, or, you know, morning pages, gratitude journaling. So, you know, go for your walk every day for 30 minutes. And then also have 15 minutes a day where you sit down with your tea or your coffee and you just write. You have a dialogue with yourself. And if you don't have anything to say, write about how you don't have anything to say, you know? And you're going to do this the first day and you're going to be like, okay, well, that was uneventful. You know what I mean? It's such a subtle dynamic. But over time, you know, I recommend people do it for 3 months, you know, and if you do this really, really simple practice, it kind of brings you back online again.
I think it's so interesting. There's so many things there that I want to unpack, because Susan and I just had this conversation with our members and Be the Evidence.live last weekend about using the morning pages. And I know this is something, Susan, that you have used repeatedly with your clients.
I use this tool with my clients all the time. And I tell them, your ego is going to not want to do it. They're going to say, let's do 8 minutes instead of 10. Let's eat a banana first. Or Susan is stupid. Why am I doing this? You know, it's going to say all kinds of things because it doesn't want to break through. It doesn't want to break through. But if you force yourself to do it, you can get into really hidden gems in there. I mean, it really works. The pages start talking back to you. You get all kinds of inspiration. I mean, I'm a very strong advocate. I stand up for the morning pages to everyone that I work with.
I think it's a beautiful way to cultivate creativity, but I also think like it speaks to this deeper conversation that we're really having, is about like that meditative walk, right? Like the act of morning pages, the act of grounding in, especially like right now, right? All this Piscean energy, like we're kind of feeling, I mean, you can obviously speak to it way more than I can, Susan, feeling lost a lot of times, out to bay. And is there anything else you want to add there?
Well, everybody feels lost. Well, I don't know about everybody, but the energy right now is feeling lost, confused, in a fog, kind of set out to drift. It's things are slipping in and out. Things are coming in real fast and they're leaving real fast. And so we don't have a whole lot of control right now. And Aubrey, you and I get this question all the time, and Be the Evidence.live is, what do we do with that? And that's why I'm so excited that Slade agreed to be here today, because he's got actual tools on how to deal with that kind of stuff.
Right. And like to talk about this aspect of truly grounding into our bodies, like this is true. Like what you said is completely right. It's like we live heart up, right? Like and I think this goes to a culture of like, we start at the foundation and we're taught, a lot of us are taught at a very young age it's not safe to fully inhabit our bodies, right? Like that's why we shift up and out, right? Because it's not, we have not been in situations where it's incredibly safe to be within our bodies. Like that process of just walking meditation, and you even speak in that podcast about like getting clean, right? Cutting out the addictions of whatever they may be, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's sugar, like whether it's shitty relationships, right? Like wherever we are using a scapegoat to keep us from grounding in, or to keep us from pushing underneath that, like, oh, I need a banana right now, instead of sitting down and doing the pages, or of like, oh, I can't walk in my neighborhood. Okay, but you could stand out on your porch more than likely and take steps back and forth and help pull this energy back into your body. I think it's really important because it doesn't have to be like this far-fetched idea. There's no like sitting down with a guru and being like, all right, and now we're in a meadow, right? Like it's really something that's accessible to you. You also talk in the reboot about like coming back into your inspiration and your creativity and grounding in by returning to a practice of gratitude. I'm really curious about this because last night I was reading in my PhD work, and it was about this gratitude practice. And it was research about how people don't sustain the gratitude practice, how we are really quick to do it for a short amount of time, but that we don't do it overall for a long period of time, but that it will actually shift brain waves and shift serotonin levels and dopamine levels, but we don't commit to it. So I'm very curious about, you mentioned it, and I know in that podcast you said for 90 days, you proposed 90 days, tell me how this is for you, right? How do you feel like the gratitude practice helps you currently, or if you're not using it currently, how it helped you at that point in time when you were proposing this forward?
I just had to do it myself last month. January, I think Susan posts the meme for January 29. It was a really long year, but we made it. That was definitely my attitude. It was the longest month ever. And it wasn't a particularly good one. And I was, I can be a cynical, jaded, negative person. There's a part of my personality that can really get into that mindset. And I know that it's a choice and it's a habit. It's like anything else, that you kind of have to police. And when you police things and try to remove them, you have to have something to replace it with, so that's the whole idea of doing the gratitude thing. I definitely find it works, and the best evidence is for someone just to do it. There was a meme going around where you did it for 21 days. That was the science that said, 21 days you post 3 things that you're grateful for. And I did it, and it worked. Of course it worked. Sometimes I need a reboot of the gratitude practice. But so what I will do, so maybe, I don't sit down and do it every day and post it on Facebook all year round. But what I will do is I'll catch myself needing it, and I'll do it in the moment. Just say you catch yourself in the moment. You're driving down the street and you're just like thinking about 30 million things that are irritating to you. And I just catch myself doing that. And I immediately call out, like it's a game you would do with kids riding in a car. I just call out 3 things that I like that are in my field of vision at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a cool tree. I like that color car. And I will do this often in the car. I don't know what it is about the car, but I think for me, the car represents some kind of, bubble of alone time, so I find myself doing a lot of personal development activities while driving. You know what? In the moment, I'll just catch myself. And it's kind of like, when you catch yourself not breathing, mm-hmm. and you have to stop and like, I need to breathe. I need to take a few deep breaths and count. And so you do it in the moment and then you move on. I actually think for me, because I'll rebel against anything that's got too many rules, it helps for me just to know that, what, in the moment when you have a little dark cloud over your head, just bust that up. Just take a minute, name 3 things that you like, name 5, name 10, however many you can.
think this is so important. The symbolism of being in the car, of like that transportation, of transporting you through a different level of consciousness, right? Of like starting and being like, oh, I'm in a dark place. I have alone time, and now I'm going to transport into like gratitude. Love it. But also, I think it's like that bigger conversation that we keep having within the astrology about new beginnings, like new hope, right? Like new opportunities and new worlds coming in. And Susan, like what a better way, right, to receive a new way of being in the world with the vehicle of gratitude.
Right. I mean, we're in a lot of water right now at the moment. We're in, as we record this, we're in Mercury retrograde on approach to the sun. For people who have Scorpio placements, it's trining in. I happen to have a lot of Scorpio placements. I'm the same way. Yep. Same with Slade. So Scorpio rising, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I mean,
and
Scorpio,
moon.
And moon. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So that can feel like I'm going down. And whenever you have a lot of really strong, intense energy within you, man, it can just be, I just heard that bird, and it'll pop you out. Mm-hmm. I mean, the smallest things to remind you that you're here, you're okay, life is still in your favor, life is still showing up, so you keep showing up. The littlest things. You don't have to go into, I'm so grateful for the people who bring water to villages, and I wish I should be doing that too, and I'm not, so probably I'm not participating as much as I should. Like, whoa, calm down. Like, notice the little things right in front of you. Mm-hmm. One bird can pop you out of it. It's really important to ground whenever we're in so much water, because people can go down into spirals and drown, just go all the way under. Mm-hmm. And how do you get yourself out? Is you get your head above water and notice things that are outside of the water. Notice the air that you're breathing. Notice the things that are on land, and you can pull yourself out.
Yeah, it's that ability, I think, to pull yourself out that's so important. Right? Of being willing to stand on your own side, to recognize that it's like that quote of like, the greatest healer you will ever find is you as the healer, right? Like that you have that capability to rescuing yourself, to healing yourself, to being your own intuitive, to being your own teacher. If right, if there's always an if you're willing to pay attention to the bird, if you're willing to take the steps, if you're willing to write the pages, if you're willing to show up, if you're willing to be a participant with life. And I think that's like this bigger conversation, right? Of how are you willing to be a participant of life? I know like we have Be the Evidence, and you have automatic intuition, and then there's like these platforms that are popping up all around because of that. And they're evidence, but they're also participation within the worlds that we're creating, right? And how they're received, I think, is a beautiful testament to how many other people are seeking the same things that we are creating. So I'm curious, Slade, is there anything new that you're creating that you're like, this is really inspiring to me because of that, a desire to shape shift? I know like that we're getting where the astrology is at, is like it's requiring us to think about things in a way we haven't thought about them. What are we really being pulled towards? Like, what are these new opportunities that we're ready to possibly lead ourselves into, even if we don't have all of the details figured out? Where are we willing to walk? Is there anything that's coming up in your world right now around that?
My platform has evolved kind of similarly to yours. Your podcast has sort of become a community, and the same thing has happened with the Shift Your Spirits podcast. We created a Facebook community for the people who listen to that show. And my moderators are other people that I've worked with who are part of Automatic Intuition. And so I actually had to delegate like 99% of that. And having been someone for over a decade who ran a one-man band all the time, the biggest shift for me has been around the idea that I can use my platform to create space for other people to be in, and that I don't have to do anything. I don't have to perform. I don't have to walk around and check on everyone. That, just by creating the environment for them to come in, they do it for each other. You know what I mean? And I've been blown away by how much people will do with something like a Facebook community. If you give them the right place and, and set up the right parameters for it to happen. I kind of, watch it in awe sometimes. And because I'm not making it, I'm not responsible for it. It's like my picture's up there, like I'm the, leader of Vietnam or something, but, or no, North Korea, like dear leader up there with my face, and, seriously, it's kind of like, okay. I used to really feel like a lot of one-on-one communication in my work, meaning I was talking to individual people. And now the thing that I see is that it's not even that I'm talking to groups. The groups are now talking to each other and themselves. And again, it's a network of peers. Mm-hmm. These aren't all a bunch of wide-eyed, innocent people who've never, studied anything in their life. They're all, studied, intelligent, smart, practicing people who will chime in. Everybody's opinions are great. So the thing that I'm seeing shifting in my own quote unquote business or platform or work is around this idea of giving a lot of it away, and creating the structures that allow that to happen, allowing people to take, one of my tutorials and workshop it, or to take something like the reboot and create a group around that, and all do it together and, give each other support and, have conversations about it. I feel like strangely proud. It's like, I don't really know, like, if I can really give myself credit for it, but yet it's so amazing just to see what you're putting out there being picked up and then taken and used in ways that you hadn't imagined. That's what I'm seeing.
I love it. It's such a testament to like allowance. We talked about this a little bit today in the podcast about releasing that need for attachment, right? Like, I think this is the trap to me about being creative, is that you go in and you're like, oh, I'm going to create this. I'm going to create this project. I'm going to create this relationship. I'm going to create this platform. I'm going to create whatever it is. And it has to be this way. It's like being okay with it being B+ or C+ or an F, like whatever, right? But then behind that is like that storyline of, and then it's going to have this impact, and then it's going to do this, and then it's going to be received in this manner. And we're like very attached to that outcome, and how different it is to release it and allow it to be completely allowed, right? Like to be received and utilized in whatever way it may want to be, and to stand back and be in awe and gratitude, to use that like as that gratitude marker of like, whoa, I didn't even see that one coming. Susan, you're nodding your head because I know you've got something.
Yeah, it's it's the thing about how it doesn't belong to you anymore. And then also, one of the things that I took away from my experience in the corporate world, one of the things that I really believe strongly now that I'm out, is that you should always be training your replacement. Always. Yes. Someone should always be taking it over, because then you go on to something else. You should always be going on to something else. Don't attach yourself to one thing and be like, this is mine. No, let somebody else take it. Train your replacement. Oh, I'm always replaceable. Always, always, always. Because that frees you up to go on and create something new. We should always be creating something new. The days of dedicating yourself to one thing all the way through, get your pension, and you're in the grave. Nope, that's over. It's over. You should always be creating new worlds. Challenge yourself by training your replacements all the time.
Yeah. And
that's can I say something really quick to Susan? Susan, you just channeled a message for me. That's such a huge aspiration, because before I got on this call with you guys, I'm kind of in the planning stages of training people to do a lot of support services for me. There's a lot of really talented people that can have those conversations and provide some of that support. And I can train them, give them some guidelines to do that. And it would free up ungodly amounts of time, like you said, for me to then create something else. So thank you for saying that. It was a message for me.
Absolutely. Good.
I think it's also such a beautiful testament too about like that bigger conversation we were having with grounding, right? Like when we're really deeply grounded with ourselves and what we truly need, you need more time, right? Like we have these needs and we have these ways that we want to show up in the world. And when we're truly grounded and in reciprocation with our deepest knowing, our deepest truths, how we work best, how we perform best, how we feel lit up, then it's a lot easier to be like, oh, and now I'm going to create and release. Now I'm going to inspire other people. Now I'm going to take hands off and stay in my centered truth. And I think that's a beautiful teaching in itself too, of like, they work hand in hand. They're not these separate topics. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Slade, you also did some work, which, speaking of not being separate, on the money shift and about dismantling or reprogramming negative thought patterns, especially around money. And like, if we really dissect what is money, it's energy, right? So I think that's really valuable to speak about on this unconscious programming that we all have, and how that plays a role in what we're able to create, how we're able to root into what we receive, what we allow. How did that project come about for you?
The money shift grew out of the financial collapse, the Great Recession that happened at the end of 2008 going into early 2009. I believe I've got those years right. So what was happening for me in January, February, March of 2009 is client after client after client responding to all this zeitgeist of financial panic. Even if it wasn't affecting them, it was affecting their feelings, and it was really stirring up a lot of those voices that we all have, you know, negative, fearful voices about money stuff. And I literally found myself doing these one-on-one conversations where it was becoming a speech. I was teaching the same thing. And basically what I was doing was sharing my recipe for what I did when I was really in the ditch financially to kind of turn myself around. And it was not unlike the reboot or this idea of reframing or gratitude journaling. I think if you could take everything that I put out there and all the messages that I feel like are 1,000 different messages, really there's a common thread around this idea of reframing things. Mm-hmm. Catching the negative voice and saying, wait a minute, where did you come from? You didn't originate with me. I picked you up somewhere. So what's something I'd rather tell myself than listen to you? You know, what's an alternative to whatever that is? So it really just came from this place of like, these people are spending a lot of money to talk to me one after the other. And at this point, I've got a prepared like set of exercises for them. So I took a weekend and just wrote it down. And I said, it doesn't make sense for someone who's feeling fearful about money to spend a bunch of money to figure out what to do about it. So I wanted it to be inexpensive. I put it online for $22 because that's a master manifesting number. And it was the most successful thing that I've ever created. And it, again, B+ information. It wasn't polished and gorgeous, and I didn't get like a professional person to do the cover. I just put the recipe in the hands of as many people that wanted to have it as possible. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is really just taking a moment to examine, taking many moments. It's like 5 minutes a day, basically, to look at where are these voices coming from? What are they saying? Where do they originate? And what can I say instead? You know, just reprogramming that dialogue. We've always got something chattering away in some part of our brain, whether you want to think of that as intuitive or some psychological, clinical explanation. We've got little radio stations that are just always on in the background. And, you know, you can really, really change your life by turning those up a couple of notches and paying attention to them.
True. I love the, if you whittle it all down, that it's really the process of reframing, right? Like Susan and I have talked about this so many times of like the collapse of suppression, how both of us thought that would be something that we witnessed on the outside, that it was like you turn on your television screens and like there's suppression crumbling down. But really like it's this awareness of I have storylines. in me that are about that are in my relationships that are about that, right? And I mean, Susan, you can speak about the astrology of why suppression's ending or where it's ending. For obviously, it's ending in all different areas for all of us, but
yeah, it's Pluto and Capricorn. Pluto and Capricorn is tearing down old systems, rules, traditions, methods of suppression through fear. It's tearing them all down. Saturn's going to come in and dismantle it, and Jupiter's going to come in and rebuild. And so everything that has been controlling us is collapsing. And that means that everything that's what's been controlling us, the messages it's been feeding to us, that's gotten into our bones, that's collapsing too. And it can be very vulnerable and exposing to all of a sudden go, without that method of control telling me what's okay and what's not, and telling me what to do, what's good and what's bad, and rewarding me for those things, I don't know what to do with myself. It can be scary. I mean, I ever since I left my corporate job, again, for a long time, I was really scared. I had like survival fears, but everything kept working out. And life had a talk with me. I was like, do you recognize that you're leading with panic and fear and it keeps coming together? Do you recognize that? I'm like, well, yeah. And then it was like, well, what would happen if you led with trust and allowance? And I'm like, oh, yeah, it could be even better. Wow. That reframing, I totally agree. Reframe it in a way that comes from your own self-agency.
Yeah, and I don't think it matters if we're talking about money, if we're talking about relationships, if we're talking about creativity, if we're talking about intuition. What's really coming up of like all of those aspects is fear of restriction, of I don't know how to receive this. I don't know how to be this. I don't know that I can be this. I don't know that I can accept it. I don't know that it's going to work out in my favor, right? Like it's like this conversation that's like, I don't know how to trust consciousness. I don't know how to trust that life is really on my side, that it's all going to work out. And that like bigger requirement of being an allowance or of reframing and of grounding into our experiences. And I really do believe that requires us to, on some level, acknowledge that we are creatives, that we are intuitives, that we are co-conspiring with life, with universe, with creator. Yeah. Slade, is there anything within your intuitive development, within you and the people that you help to mentor, where you have seen other people being like, oh yeah, this is a co-partnership? Like, I think like us having this conversation is like clear evidence of a co-partnership that's taking place within spirit or within the universe and shifting the dialogue. But I think you also see this within Shift Your Spirits community, that more and more people are popping up being like, yes, this is how we participate in a new world and a new paradigm, in dismantling that suppression or that fear-based living that's in our bones or that we're subscribing to. Is that, I don't even know if I've even asked a question there.
Well, ask me a question.
How do you see this evolving and playing out and uprising for you, of more and more people choosing consciousness and being the evidence in their own worlds? Like, how are you reaching, grasping, and beholding that hope for humanity shifting in the ways that made you start automatic intuition?
So the one thing that comes up for me a lot, whether it's intuitive development or discernment, I think is kind of part of the question in there. A lot of times for intuitive people, how do I know? How do I know? How do I know? That's like the big thing. And that goes along with the trust, faith, the allowance issue. How do I know? And you don't. You do it anyway, and then you see if it worked. That's part of the equation. But the other really big thing for me is constantly seeing people have aha moments that, as I said earlier in our conversation, we're really bad judges of our own value and worth. And we really need feedback from outside the vacuum of our own mind to get our bearings. You can have an intuition and you can act on that and then see feedback in the world like, oh yeah, that was the right choice to make. You know, that's where you get the feeling of knowing. you don't get the knowing first. You don't. You really do have to proceed with a little bit of either faith or, rebellion or whatever it might feel like in the moment. But another thing too, that idea of fear and those voices and that programming and all that social stuff that we've been indoctrinated with, when you're alone in your own head with that, that's when it has the most power over you. It's really, really hard to wrestle with the ego because it has imagination to work with, and they can get together and create a story that is so convincing for you that it will paralyze you from making any type of decision. And the thing that I find over and over again, especially with intuitives, is that no matter how intuitive you are, you need somebody else's frame of reference. You need somebody else's affirmation, like the things Susan said. And I was like, oh my God, thank you for saying that, because I was contemplating that. And now I've heard it outside my own head. Like I was kind of telling myself that, but there's something so powerful about having someone that you admire as being, smart and intelligent and dialed in to say the thing that you want to say to yourself. And it is easier to trust other people. So the trick is that sometimes you just have to be the person who opens their mouth first,
Yeah, Susan and I have been talking about the role of mirrors.
Yeah.
And having practitioners, friends, tribe, community mirror to us. And I know, Susan, that's been something that's been really coming up for both of us, but specifically you a lot lately, of being able to receive tribe.
Being able to receive tribe, being able to be honest about the mirrors that are in front of you, being open to it, and also being a mirror for other people. Just like Slade saying, sometimes you have to be the one to open your mouth first. And opening your mouth first might involve you leaping past, well, what if I'm wrong? Well, who cares? Try. Maybe you are wrong. Maybe whenever you speak up, somebody can say, I was talking with a client friend of mine about a concept that I was thinking about, which is completely off topic. But I went to her and I said, this is how I'm seeing this through. This is the message that I feel like I'm giving to people. And I want to check with you because she's an expert in this area that I was talking about. And I want to check with you and see if I'm accurate about that. And she said, it's accurate, but I want to add an amendment. And she amended it in a way that fleshed it out. And had I not said anything to her, I would have kept on without that element that made it complete. So sometimes speaking first and being like, I don't know if I'm completely right about this, but here's my current thinking, and allowing other people to add to it.
Yeah, it's just this theme over and over again about how willing are you to partner and participate in the world as it's unfolding? How willing are you to be engaged with yourself and universe and others around you, so that we can all reveal ourselves, so that we can all unfold, so that we can all evolve, so we can all up level in how we participate, how we ground in, how we're conscious, how we're intuitive, but ultimately how we peel back, reveal, and release all of those ways that we have not fully lived our lives, how we've not fully been embodied, how we've not fully been able to show up in the world. Slade, I'm really deeply grateful for you, the way you do show up and your time with us and the perspective that you share within humanity. Like, I feel just deeply honored to be in this life with you at this time. We'll leave it at that, because otherwise the tears will start.
I completely agree. If we're in the realm of building webs together with people, man, if we're in the same web as Slade, we're doing good. We're doing really good.
Thank you, guys. I feel the same way about both of you as well, and that's what I meant about the idea of this of not having to do all this stuff by yourself. That my expansion is not about me expanding; it's about letting everybody else do what they do really well. And realizing that I don't have to carry anything, and just have to. Maybe you have to host something. One of my mentors, who's really more of a business mentor than anything, he said one of the most powerful things you can do if you want to start something and you don't even know what it is, just host something, create a space for everyone to show up and just observe and listen. And you can do nothing but be the host and let everybody else use that space however they want to do it. It's not that hard, but it is about this sort of kind of put some skin in the game in whatever little way you can.
So true. How do you show up and how do you choose to be the evidence in your own world?